The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was a place where 847 different alien species came together to talk, trade, and solve problems without fighting. Wars still happened sometimes, but they followed strict rules. No one was allowed to kill too many. No one was allowed to destroy too much. Everything was controlled, measured, and civilized. Humans had joined this great council only 60 years ago. In a galaxy billions of years old, 60 years was nothing. It was like a single drop of water in an endless ocean. The other species looked at humanity and saw nothing special. They were small. They were young. They came from a tiny blue planet on the edge of the galaxy where nothing important ever happened. Ambassador Taiho Park represented humanity in the great halls of Station Prime. He was a calm man in his late 50s with gray hair and tired eyes. Every day, he walked into the massive chamber where thousands of alien delegates discussed the fate of the galaxy. Every day, he was ignored. When he raised his hand to speak, the council moved to the next topic. When he submitted proposals, they were lost in endless committees. When he tried to make friends with other ambassadors, they smiled politely and walked away. To them, he was a representative of a species that did not matter. The jokes about humans spread quietly through the station. Other species laughed at how humans still fought wars among themselves on their own planet. They laughed at how humans ate dead animals and drank fermented plants. They laughed at how humans lived such short lives and still thought they were important. Taiho heard these jokes. He said nothing. He simply did his job and waited. The Veth Dominion was one of the oldest and proudest empires in the galaxy. They were tall insectoid creatures, with 4 arms, hard shells covering their bodies, and large black eyes that showed no emotion. For 800 years, they had expanded their territory by conquering weaker species. They were warriors. They respected only strength. Recently, the Veth had become aggressive again. They moved their fleets into neutral space. They demanded that smaller species pay tribute or face destruction. The Galactic Council responded with sanctions and angry speeches. The Veth ignored them completely. On a quiet morning in the human calendar month of March, a Veth warfleet made a hyperspace jump. They were traveling to intimidate a small species called the Talani into surrender. But something went wrong with their calculations. When they emerged from hyperspace, they were not in Talani space. They were in human space. The Veth commander looked at his navigation screens and saw a small moon orbiting a distant planet. On that moon was a human mining colony called New Busan. 3,200 humans lived there, digging for rare minerals and sending them back to Earth. The Veth commander had a choice. He could apologize for entering human space without permission. He could turn his fleet around and leave. The Galactic Council would file a complaint. Humans would accept the apology, and everyone would forget about it in a week instead. The commander made a different choice. He had heard the jokes about humans too. He knew they were weak, young, and unimportant. He decided to teach them a lesson about respecting their betters. He decided to show the galaxy that the Veth Dominion feared no one. He gave the order to fire. The mining colony had no weapons. It had no shields. It had no military ships to defend it. The people there were workers, engineers, and their families. They had come to build a new life far from Earth. 17 minutes later, they were all dead. The Veth fleet jumped away without a word. The commander filed a report saying he had destroyed a human military installation that threatened his ships. It was a lie, but he did not think anyone would care about the truth. On Station Prime, Ambassador Taiho Park was sitting in his usual seat at the back of the council chamber. He was listening to a debate about trade routes that had been going on for 3 days. His assistant, a young woman named Hannah, walked up to him with a tablet in her hands. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. Taiho took the tablet and read the message. He read it again. He read it a 3rd time because his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. The chamber continued its debate. No one noticed the human ambassador sitting frozen in his seat. No one saw his hands grip the tablet so hard that his knuckles turned white. Then something strange happened. An alert appeared on every delegate's screen. The Council's communication system had received an emergency broadcast from human space. The images began to play automatically on the massive screens around the chamber. The delegates watched footage of the destroyed colony. They saw the broken buildings, the burning wreckage, the bodies floating in the vacuum of space. They heard the final transmissions from the colonists begging for help that never came. The chamber fell silent. The Aurelian Elder Counselor, an ancient being named Velis who had lived for 3,000 years, turned to look at the human ambassador. She had seen many tragedies in her long life. She had watched species grieve and cry and beg the council for justice. She expected Tejo Park to do the same. But the human did not cry. He did not beg. He did not even raise his voice. He simply stood up from his seat, straightened his jacket, and walked to the speaker's platform. His footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Every eye watched him move. When he reached the platform, he stood still for a long moment. He looked at the faces of the delegates who had ignored him for years. He looked at the representatives of species who had laughed at humanity behind closed doors. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and steady. There was no anger in it, no grief, no fear. There was something else, something the other species did not recognize because they had never heard it from humans before. It was certainty. 3,200 of my people are dead, Tejo said. Workers, engineers, families, children, they were killed without warning by a Veth war fleet that entered our space illegally. He paused and looked directly at the Veth delegation across the chamber. The insectoid ambassadors shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. For 60 years, humanity has asked this council for respect. We have been patient. We have been polite. We have followed every rule and filled out every form and waited for our turn to speak. He took a slow breath. That time is over. Leoni, an elder counselor, leaned forward. Ambassador Park, the council offers its deepest condolences. We will form a committee to investigate this incident and determine appropriate sanctions against the Veth Dominion. Tejo smiled. It was not a happy smile. Thank you, Elder Counselor. But humanity will not be waiting for your committee. He turned to address the entire chamber. You have spent 60 years teaching us that we do not matter. You have ignored our requests, dismissed our concerns, and treated us like children. Perhaps you were right. Perhaps we were too weak to deserve your attention. His eyes hardened. You have our attention now. He walked out of the chamber without another word. Behind him, 847 species sat in stunned silence. Wondering what they had just witnessed, they would find out soon enough. Fleet. Admiral Unibeak was sleeping when her communicator started screaming. She was 62 years old, a small woman with short gray hair and a face marked by decades of service. She had commanded ships in Earth's last great war, back when humans still fought each other over borders and resources. That war had taught her things about combat that no academy could ever teach. She answered the call in the darkness of her bedroom. 20 minutes later, she was in her uniform and walking into the Earth Defense Command, Tantor and Sol. The room was filled with officers staring at screens, their faces lit by the glow of terrible news. Una read the reports. She watched the footage. She looked at the faces of the dead colonists and memorized every single one. Then she started giving orders. The Galactic Council had rules about war. If someone attacked you, you were allowed to attack them back, but only by the same amount. If they destroyed one of your ships, you could destroy one of theirs. If they killed 100 of your people, you could kill 100 of theirs. Everything was supposed to be equal, balanced, and fair. Humans had never agreed to these rules. They had signed the treaties because they had no choice, but they had never truly accepted them. Deep in their hearts, humans knew a truth that other species had forgotten. War was not a game. War was survival. And in war, you did whatever it took to make sure your enemy could never hurt you again. For 20 years, Unibeak had been building Earth's combined fleet. On paper, it looked small and weak. 200 warships against the thousands that other empires commanded. The Galactic Council had looked at these numbers and laughed. They had classified humanity as a Tier 7 civilization, barely capable of defending their own solar system. They had never looked closely at how human ships were designed. Other species built their warships to look impressive. They covered them in bright colors and decorative patterns. They installed weapons that made beautiful lights when they fired. Their ships were meant to intimidate enemies into surrender without actually fighting. Human ships were gray, ugly, and covered in thick armor plating. They carried no decorations. They had no windows. Every centimeter of space was filled with weapons, ammunition, and redundant systems. They were not built to impress anyone. They were built to kill. Dr. Suho Kim arrived at the command center an hour after Yuna. He was the chief, military strategist for Earth's defense forces. A quiet man who spent his days studying alien species and finding their weaknesses. He carried a tablet filled with information about the Veth Dominion. "Tell me everything," Yuna said. Suho pulled up maps and charts on the main screen. The Veth have conquered 43 worlds in the past 800 years. Their fleet consists of approximately 2,000 warships. They have never lost a war. Why not? Because everyone surrenders before the war truly begins. The Veth are terrifying. They look like nightmares. They fight without mercy. Every species that has faced them has calculated the cost of resistance and decided it was too high. Yuna nodded slowly. What about their weaknesses? Suho hesitated. Their entire military doctrine is based on intimidation. They expect enemies to be afraid. They expect enemies to surrender or run. They have never faced an opponent willing to take massive casualties to achieve victory. So they have never faced humans. No, Admiral. They have not. Yuna turned to her officers. How long until the fleet is ready to move? 72 hours, replied her second-in-command, a young captain named Dongwan. We need to recall ships from patrol duty and load additional ammunition. Yeah, 48 hours. I want every ship armed with full nuclear payloads. Load the Hellfire torpedoes. The room went silent. Hellfire torpedoes were weapons that the Galactic Council had tried to ban. They were missiles that penetrated enemy hulls and released burning chemicals inside the ship. The chemicals could not be extinguished by any known method. They simply burned until there was nothing left to burn.
Admiral,
Dongwan said carefully, the Council considers those weapons illegal. The Council also considers attacking civilian colonies illegal. The Veth did not seem to care about that rule. Yuna's eyes were cold. If the Council wants to punish us for using banned weapons, they can form a committee after we are done. On Station Prime, Ambassador Taiho Park was meeting with representatives from other species. The Aurelians offered to mediate peace talks. The Mech Federation offered to file formal complaints. The Talani, the species the Veth, had originally been trying to attack. Offered their sympathies, Taiho thanked them all politely and declined their help. Humanity will handle this matter ourselves, he said. The Aurelian elder counselor. Velis visited him in his quarters that evening. She was ancient and wise, her skin wrinkled like old paper, her eyes carrying the weight of 3,000 years. She had seen many young species make mistakes in their anger. Ambassador Park, she said gently, I understand your grief, but you must not let emotion guide your actions. The Veth are powerful. If you attack them, they will destroy you. Taiho poured tea for both of them. His hands were perfectly steady. Elder Counselor, how many species has the Council watched the Veth conquer in the past 800 years? Velis was silent. How many times has the Council issued sanctions and warnings while the Veth ignored them and continued expanding? How many worlds have fallen because civilized species were too polite to fight back? Violence solves nothing, Velis said. It only creates more violence. Perhaps. Taiho sipped his tea. But I have learned something in my 60 years, Elder Counselor. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit them so hard they never think about hurting anyone again. And if you fail? If the Veth crush your little fleet and burn your homeworld, Taiho smiled, then we will take as many of them with us as we can. And the next young species that joins this council will remember what happened to humanity. They will remember that we stood up when no one else would. Velis stared at him for a long moment. She had lived for 3,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched species evolve from primitive creatures to spacefaring civilizations. She had never seen anything quite like the look in this human's eyes. "You are not afraid," she whispered. "Elder Counselor, we are not afraid. We are angry." Back on Earth, Admiral Unibeak stood on the bridge of her flagship, the battleship Eternal Soul. Around her, 200 warships were completing their final preparations. Ammunition was being loaded. Weapons were being tested. Crews were saying goodbye to their families. Una opened a channel to the entire fleet. "This is Admiral Beak. In 48 hours, we will jump to Veth space. We will not be asking for negotiations. We will not be demanding apologies. We will be delivering a message." She paused. 3,200 of our people died on Nu. Buzan, workers, engineers, families, children, they were killed because a Veth commander thought we were too weak to matter. He thought no one would care about a few dead humans. Her voice hardened. He was wrong. Some of you may not come back from this mission. I will not lie to you about that. The Veth are strong. But strength is not everything. What matters is will. What matters is determination. What matters is the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you love. The Veth have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who is not afraid to die. We are going to remind them. She cut the channel and turned to her navigation officer. "Set course for Veth Prime. Admiral, that is their homeworld. It will be the most heavily defended location in their entire empire." "I know," Unibeak smiled, and there was something ancient and terrible in that smile. "That is exactly why we are going there." The Veth High Command was not worried when reports came that humans were preparing a military response. The insectoid generals clicked their mandibles in amusement. They had studied humanity's fleet. 200 ships against an empire of 2,000. It was like watching an insect try to fight a giant. The High Commander, a massive creature named Keth, who had led the Veth to victory in 12 wars, deployed 400 warships to defend the most likely targets. He placed them around the outer colonies that bordered human space. He was certain that the humans would attack one of these smaller targets, destroy a few buildings, and then return home claiming victory. That was how other species fought. Small, symbolic attacks that allowed everyone to save face. The Veth would pretend to be hurt. The humans would pretend to be satisfied. And life would continue as before. Keth went to sleep on the evening before the human fleet was expected to arrive. He was not worried at all. He woke up to alarms screaming throughout the command center. The human fleet had not appeared at any of the outer colonies. They had ignored every logical target, every strategic position, every military installation along the border. They had jumped directly to Veth Prime. Keth stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet was already engaging the home defense force. 800 ships that protected the most important planet in the entire Dominion. No sane species would attack a target this heavily defended. No rational commander would risk their entire fleet against such overwhelming odds. But there they were, Admiral. Unibeak watched the Veth ships scramble to intercept her fleet. They were forming into neat lines, arranging themselves in precise formations, following the tactical doctrines they had used for 800 years. She smiled. "All ships, break formation. Execute attack pattern Sigma 7. On the bridge of every human ship, officers relayed the order. And then the human fleet did something that confused the Veth. Completely, they scattered, instead of meeting the Veth in organized battle lines. The human ships split apart and attacked from every direction at once. Destroyers dove under the Veth formation while cruisers swung around the flanks. The massive battleships charged straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, their armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed any other vessel captain. Junho Lee commanded the destroyer Indomitable. He was 34 years old, recently married, with a daughter who had just started school. When he had said goodbye to her that morning, she had made him promise to come home safely. Now his ship was burning. A Veth cruiser had caught the Indomitable with a direct hit to the engine section. Half of Junho's crew was dead. The ship was drifting without power, unable to fight, unable to flee, but the Indomitable was still moving. The momentum from its last burst of speed was carrying it forward, straight toward a Veth dreadnought. The largest and most powerful ship in the enemy formation, JUNHO, looked at the distance readings. Then he looked at what remained of his crew. "Everyone get to the escape pods," he said quietly. His first officer, a woman named Yoonji, shook her head. "Captain, we stay with you." "That is an order, Lieutenant. Someone needs to survive this to tell the story." He smiled at her. "Tell my daughter I love her." The crew evacuated. Gunho stayed at his post, manually steering what was left of his ship. The Veth dreadnought was trying to move out of the way. But it was too large and too slow. The Indomitable struck the dreadnoughts. Engine core at full speed. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a new sun. When the light faded, both ships were gone. Across the battle, human captains watched what Yunho had done. They understood the message. This was not a war they were planning to survive. This was a war they were planning to win. More human ships made similar choices. Damaged vessels rammed into enemy formations instead of retreating. Captains overloaded their reactors to create explosions that took enemy ships with them. Crew members stayed at their posts even as fire consumed their compartments, continuing to fire weapons until the very last moment. The Veth had never seen anything like it. They were warriors. They understood sacrifice. But they sacrificed themselves for glory, for honor, for the chance to die in a great battle. Humans were sacrificing themselves for something else entirely. They were sacrificing themselves for revenge. Admiral Beak watched the battle unfold from the Bridge of Eternal. Seoul, her flagship, had taken several hits, but the thick armor was holding. Around her, officers called out status reports in calm, professional voices. "Enemy formation is breaking, Admiral." 3 Veth carriers destroyed. For more heavily damaged, our losses at 63 ships. 71% of fleet still combat effective. 63 ships gone. Thousands of her people dead. Yuna felt each loss like a knife in her heart. But she did not let it show on her face. "Continue the attack," she ordered. "Focus fire on their command ships." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Veth fought with skill and courage. They destroyed dozens of human ships and killed thousands of human soldiers. But for every human ship they killed, they lost 2 of their own. Because humans did not fight fair. They used nuclear missiles at close range, accepting damage to their own ships to guarantee kills. They launched hellfire torpedoes that turned enemy vessels into screaming infernos. They coordinated attacks with a speed and precision that the Veth could not match, sharing information instantly across their entire fleet, and they never stopped. They never hesitated. They never showed mercy. By the 6th hour, the Veth home fleet was broken. 312 of their ships were destroyed. 200 more were crippled beyond repair. The survivors were retreating in disorder. Abandoning their defensive positions around the planet, Admiral Beak had lost 18 ships. But she had one. She opened a channel to Veth Prime. "This is Fleet Admiral Yuna Beak, of Earth's combined fleet. Your defensive fleet has been defeated. Your planet is now within range of our weapons." On the surface of Veth Prime, 4 billion Veth looked up at the sky, where strange human ships were now visible as tiny dots of light. "You attacked our colony without warning. You killed our civilians without mercy. You thought we were too weak to respond." Yuna's voice was cold and steady. "You were wrong. I am offering you one chance to end this war. Surrender unconditionally. Accept responsibility for your attack on New Busan. Pay reparations to the families of the dead. Agree to peace terms that we will dictate. You have 1 hour to respond." She cut the channel and waited. The Veth High Commander Keth received the message in his command center. Around him, his remaining officers were panicking. They had never lost a battle so completely. They had never faced an enemy so relentless. But Keth was a warrior. He had spent his entire life fighting. He had never surrendered to anyone. "Send a response," he ordered. "Tell the humans that the Veth Dominion does not bow to lesser species. Tell them we will fight to the last soldier before we accept their terms." The message was sent. On the Bridge of Eternal Soul, Admiral Beak read the Veth response. She had expected this. She had hoped for something different, but she had expected this. She turned to her weapons officer. Target their planetary infrastructure. Agricultural centers, water treatment facilities, power generation stations. Nothing military, nothing residential. We are not here to kill civilians, Admiral. The weapons officer looked confused. What are we trying to accomplish? We are going to show them what happens when you make an enemy of humanity. Yuna's eyes were hard as stone. We are going to break their will to fight. Begin planetary bombardment. The bombardment lasted 12 minutes, from orbit. Human ships fired precision strikes at targets across Veth Prime. They did not hit cities. They did not hit military bases. They did not kill a single civilian directly. Instead, they destroyed farms. They shattered water purification plants. They reduced power stations to rubble and dust in 12 minutes. Humanity crippled the ability of Veth Prime to feed its population. 4 billion Veth lived on that planet. Without working farms, they would run out of food in 8 months. Without clean water, disease would spread within weeks. Without power, their hospitals and communication systems would fail. The message was clear. The Veth could not see it, but humanity was not interested in killing them. Humanity was interested in making them understand that fighting was no longer an option. On Station Prime, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence. Every delegate had access to the live feeds from Veth space. They saw the human fleet hovering over the planet like patient predators. They saw the smoke rising from destroyed infrastructure. They saw the Veth government desperately trying to calculate how long their people could survive. Ambassador Taiho Park stood at the speaker's platform. He had requested permission to address the council, and no one had dared to refuse him. 3,200 of my people died on New Busan, he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. Workers and engineers, mothers and fathers, children who had never hurt anyone in their short lives. He paused to let the words settle. The Veth killed them because they thought we were weak. They thought no one would care about a few dead humans. They thought they could murder our people and face no consequences. Today, we are teaching them a different lesson. Her ancient body was trembling with emotion. Ambassador Park, what you are doing is barbarism. You are weaponizing starvation against the civilian population. The Council cannot permit this to continue. Taiho looked at her with something almost like pity. Elder Counselor, humanity did not kill a single Veth civilian. We destroyed property. We destroyed infrastructure. We created a problem that can be solved with humanitarian aid and reconstruction. The Veth can end this crisis at any moment by accepting our terms. We are not asking them to become slaves. We are asking them to take responsibility for murdering our people and agree not to do it again. If they refuse, then their people will suffer. Not because we want them to suffer, but because their leaders chose pride over the lives of their citizens. Phyllis shook her head. This is not how civilized species behave. War has rules. War has limits. Veth did not follow rules when they attacked our colony. They did not follow limits when they killed our children. Taiho's voice hardened slightly. Humanity offered them 60 years of patience and politeness. They responded by murdering 3,000 of our people. Rules are for those who follow them. Limits are for those who respect them. The Veth respected nothing. Now they will learn what it means to face an enemy who also respects nothing. A delegate from the Mech Federation stood up. The Council should intervene. We should send peacekeeping forces to stop this aggression. I'll send it Saretta. I'll send it Tato. I'll send it Tato crawled. Dato crawled. Crawled. Crawled crawled. Crawled crato crawled. Crawled crato. Crawled crawled. Why tide I'll see. Crawled crawled. Crawled. Permentrid crawled. Called. Died. I did grab I abs I did to I die It was not a cruel laugh, but it carried a weight that made several delegates uncomfortable. You want to send ships to fight humanity? After what you just watched us do to the Veth home fleet? He shook his head. Be my guest. But I suggest you watch the battle recordings first. Pay close attention to what our captains did when their ships were damaged. Pay attention to how many of them chose to die rather than surrender. Humanity has 111 ships still in orbit around Veth Prime. If the Council sends a peacekeeping force, we will fight them too. And when we are done, we will remember who sent them. The chamber fell silent. Counselor Doris Young, a human diplomat who had worked beside Taiho for 30 years, stepped forward with a tablet in her hands. I have documentation here, she said. 87 formal complaints that humanity has submitted to this council over the past 60 years. Trade disputes where we were cheated. Border violations where our ships were harassed. A dozen incidents where human citizens were mistreated by member species. She began reading them aloud. Complaint 12. Human cargo ship detained for 17 days without cause by Mech Border Patrol. Resolution? None. Complaint 34. Human colony denied access to council medical supplies during disease outbreak. 300 dead. Resolution? Pending review. Complaint 67. Human ambassador physically assaulted by Talani delegate during trade negotiation. Resolution? Committee formed. No action taken. She continued for several minutes. The delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Every single complaint was ignored, dismissed, or buried in committees that never reached a decision. Doris looked up at the chamber. For 60 years, humanity asked this council for justice. For 60 years, we were told to wait our turn, be patient. Follow the rules. The Veth have killed our people. And suddenly, everyone wants to talk about rules and limits and civilized behavior. Taiho nodded. You taught us something valuable, Council. You've taught us that in this galaxy, the only voice that matters is the one backed by force. You taught us that polite requests are ignored while violence is respected. We were good students. He turned and walked back toward his seat. Ambassador Park Velis called out, What do you want? What will make humanity stop this attack? Taiho paused without turning around. We want the same thing we have always wanted, Elder Counselor. We want respect. We want our people to be safe. We want to live in peace without fearing that some warrior empire will murder our citizens because they think we are too weak to fight back. We did not start this war, but we will finish it. He sat down. The chamber remained silent for a long time. On Veth Prime, High Commander Keth received reports from across the planet. Food stores were already being rationed. Water treatment was down to 30% capacity. Hospitals were switching to emergency power. His people could survive for months on emergency supplies, but they could not survive forever, and the human fleet showed no signs of leaving. His officers were arguing among themselves. Some wanted to fight to the death. Others wanted to negotiate. A few were whispering about surrender. Keth watched the human ships through his window. They were just sitting there, waiting patiently, like predators who had already won and were simply waiting for their prey to realize it. He thought about the battle. He thought about human captains ramming their ships into his fleet. He thought about crews staying at their posts while their vessels burned around them. He thought about the complete absence of fear in everything the humans did. For the first time in his long career, Keth understood something terrible. He had not lost a battle. He had not lost a campaign. He had lost a war that he never understood he was fighting. The humans had not come to hurt the Veth. They had come to break them, and they had succeeded. Keth opened a communication channel to the human flagship. This is High Commander Keth of the Veth Dominion. I am prepared to discuss terms. On the bridge of Eternal Soul, Admiral Unibeak received the message. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about the 18-9 ships she had lost. The thousands of her people who would never go home. Tell the High Commander that we accept his offer to negotiate, she said. But remind him that our terms are not negotiable. Complete surrender. Full responsibility for the attack on New Busan. Reparations to every family who lost someone. And one more thing. She opened her eyes. Tell him that if any Veth ever attacks human civilians again, we will return. And next time, we will not stop at infrastructure. The message was sent. Within the hour, the Veth Dominion formally surrendered to humanity. The war was over. In the weeks that followed, human ships helped rebuild what they had destroyed. Engineers from Earth worked beside Veth workers to repair water treatment plants. Human cargo vessels delivered food supplies while the farms were replanted. Medical teams treated the sick and injured without asking for payment. The galaxy watched in confusion. The same species that had terrified the Eth into surrender was now helping them recover. The same fleet that had broken an 800-year-old empire was now distributing humanitarian aid. It made no sense to the other species, but it made perfect sense to humanity. They had not wanted to hurt us. They had wanted to teach them a lesson. Now that the lesson was learned, there was no reason to keep punishing them. The peace treaty was signed on Station Prime, in the same chamber where Ambassador Tai-Ho Park had first declared that humanity was no longer waiting for permission. The Veth agreed to all human demands. They accepted responsibility for the attack on New Busan. They paid compensation to every family who had lost someone. They ceded 3 border systems to human control. But most importantly, something unexpected happened. The Veth asked to become allies. High Commander Keth? The warrior, who had refused to surrender until his planet was starving, traveled to Earth to meet with human leaders. He spent 3 weeks there, walking through cities, visiting military academies, speaking with ordinary humans. When he returned home, he told his people what he had learned. Humans are not monsters, he said. They are not cruel or bloodthirsty or evil. They are simply willing to do whatever is necessary to protect their own. They do not start wars, but they end them completely. We made an enemy of them through our arrogance. We attacked their civilians because we thought they were weak. We were fools. Now they have shown us mercy we did not deserve. They are helping us rebuild what they destroyed. They are treating us with respect we did not earn. I do not fully understand humans, but I know this. I would rather have them as allies than enemies, and I believe they feel the same about us. The alliance between humanity and the Veth Dominion became the most unexpected partnership in galactic history. 2 species who had fought a brutal war became close friends within a single generation. Veth warriors trained alongside human soldiers. Human engineers helped modernize Veth ships. The 2 species learned from each other and grew stronger together. Admiral Unibeak retired from military service 1 year after the war. She returned to Earth and lived quietly in a small house near the ocean. She never spoke publicly about what she had done. When reporters asked about the Battle of Veth Prime, she simply said that she had followed orders and done her duty. But sometimes, late at night, she would sit on her porch and look up at the stars. She would think about the 18-9 ships she had lost. She would remember the names of every captain who had died under her command. She would see the face of Jun Ho Lee, the young man who had rammed his ship into an enemy dreadnought to save his fleet. She never forgot them. None of humanity ever forgot them. Ambassador Tai-Ho Park resigned his position 3 months after the war. He had spent his entire career being ignored and dismissed. Now he was famous across the galaxy, the human who had stood before the council and declared that his species would no longer be treated as lesser. He did not want fame. He had never wanted anything except for his people to be respected. His successor was a younger diplomat named Minji Han. She was 40 years old, with a warm smile and a gentle voice. When she spoke to other species, she seemed kind and understanding and patient, but everyone who looked into her eyes could see the steel hidden beneath the surface. They could see that she was capable of the same determination that Taiho had shown. They could see that humanity had not grown soft just because the war was over. On Station Prime, the Galactic Council held 17 days of emergency meetings to discuss what they called the human question. Delegates argued about how to respond to what had happened. Some wanted to punish humanity for violating the rules of civilized warfare. Others wanted to pretend the whole thing had never happened. In the end, they did something that had never been done in 12,000 years of Council history. They issued a formal warning to every member species. The warning was classified as mandatory reading for all government officials, military commanders, and diplomatic staff. It was taught in academies across the galaxy. It was translated into every language known to the Council. It simply said this: humans are not to be engaged in military conflict under any circumstances. They do not follow Council doctrine. They do not accept proportional response. They do not recognize acceptable losses. When threatened, humans do not seek to win battles. They seek to end wars. They will sacrifice their own ships to destroy yours. They will target your infrastructure rather than your military. They will break every rule of civilized warfare if it brings them victory 1 hour sooner. They are not cruel. They are not evil. They are simply willing to do what other species will not. Do not mistake their politeness for weakness. Do not mistake their patience for cowardice. Do not mistake their small territory for limited ambition. And above all, never give them a reason to fight. The humans have returned to their quiet corner of the galaxy. They ask only to be left in peace. Grant them this request. This warning is not a punishment. It is a mercy extended to you by a council that hopes no species will ever again learn what humanity is capable of when their people are threatened. The warning was read by billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Some laughed at it. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Some filed it away and forgot about it, but most remembered Ambassador. Minji Han read the warning in her office on Station Prime. Beside her, the Veth Ambassador, a young officer named Trell, who had fought in the war and survived, clicked his mandibles, and what humans had learned was their way of laughing. "I finally understand," he said. Minji nodded slowly. "Let us hope they remember." In the gallery above the council chamber, Elder Counselor Velis watched the human delegation leave. She was 3,000 years old, the oldest living member of her species. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had watched civilizations destroy themselves in foolish wars. She had witnessed horrors and miracles the younger beings could not imagine, but she had never felt what she was feeling now. For 3,000 years, her species had been at the top of the galactic order. They were the wise ones, the advisors, the beings who guided younger species toward civilization. They had always felt safe, protected by their knowledge and their age. Now, watching the humans walk away, Velis understood something that she had never understood before. She understood what it felt like to be prey. The humans were not predators. They were not hunting anyone. They wanted nothing except to live in peace and raise their children and build their civilization. But if anyone threatened them, if anyone hurt their people, if anyone made them angry enough to fight, they would become something terrible, something that the galaxy had never seen before, something that did not fight by rules or limits or civilized customs. They would become something that simply won Velis. Watched until the human delegation disappeared from view. Then she returned to her seat in the council chamber and began drafting a personal message to her homeworld.